Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Asung and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is video number 4 in our DevOps series, and today we are going to talk about something very important in IT and DevOps. So we are going to look at virtual machines today. The name alone may sound very technical, but don't worry, by the end of this video, you will understand what virtual machines are, why they exist, and where they are used. And I'll try to make it very easy to understand. So before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. As always, it helps the channel grow. Let's start with a very simple question. What is a virtual machine? In the simplest way possible, a virtual machine is a computer inside another computer. So a virtual machine has its own operating system, has its own memory, it has its own storage, and it has its own application. But physically, it does not exist as a separate machine. It shares the same physical hardware with your main computer. So in essence, it is self-contained. Just like I said, it has its own operating system, memory, storage, and application. It shares the hardware of your host computer. So this is what a virtual machine looks like. This is your host operating system. This is your host hardware, and you can have up to 3 virtual machines on your host computer. So imagine you are living in a very big house. Inside that house, you divide the rooms into separate apartments. Now, each apartment has its own bedroom. Each apartment has its own kitchen, its own bathroom, but they all share the same building foundation. So with this analogy, the house is the physical computer, each apartment is a virtual machine. I'll repeat it again. The building is your physical computer. The apartments inside the building can be likened to virtual machines, but each of the apartments in the building has its own kitchen and bedroom. But they all exist within the same physical structure. So why do we need virtual machines? Now, before virtual machines existed, things were very, very inefficient. Companies would buy one physical server and run only one application in it. That particular server might be using only 20% of its power, 30% of its memory, and what happens to the rest? It gets wasted. So virtual machines solve this problem by allowing multiple systems to run on one physical server safely and independently. Now, let us talk about how virtual machines actually work. Now, there is something called a hypervisor. So, in a very layman, think of hypervisor as a traffic controller of your system. Now, the hypervisor decides how much memory and CPU each virtual machine gets. The hypervisor keeps virtual machines isolated so they don't crash each other. So without an hypervisor, a virtual machine cannot exist. Look at this scenario This is your host machine. This is the hypervisor, and this hypervisor is in charge of creating virtual machines. So in simple terms, hypervisor decides how much memory each virtual machine gets, decide how much CPU power each one can use. It keeps them isolated so that they don't interfere with each other. So without the hypervisor, virtual machines cannot exist. Now, if this analogy is too difficult to grasp, let us look at another analogy. Let us look at a simple classroom example. Imagine a teacher managing a classroom. Each student gets a desk, each student gets a chair, and each student gets a book. Now, the teacher ensures no student takes another student's materials. So, in this sense, the teacher is the hypervisor, more like the manager. The students are virtual machines, and the resources are desks, chairs, and books. Just like the hypervisor, the teacher ensures no student takes another student's material. Now we have this very important question. Why do we need virtual machines? So virtual machines allow us to use hardware efficiently. So it helps us to maximize our hardware investments. Remember when I said that it was one application, one server. So imagine, let's assume your organization has up to 10 applications. Imagine buying 10 different servers for 10 different applications. It is not only expensive, it takes space. So virtual machine also allows multiple systems on one computer. So in essence, you can run Windows, you can run Linux on the same machine simultaneously. Virtual machine help us to test softwares in an isolated environment. So you can refer virtual machines to as a sandbox in which you conduct your software testing there. So in terms of isolation, if one virtual machine gets a virus, the rest and even the host stay safe. So for instance, an organization can run a web server on a virtual machine, a database on another virtual machine, a testing system on another virtual machine, all on the same physical server. So virtual machines are also very useful for learning and experimentation. So if you want to try or if you want to understand how Linux works, if you want to test new softwares, you don't have to risk your main computer or your main laptop. So if something breaks inside the virtual machine, you can simply delete it and start again while your main system still stays safe. So this is why virtual machines are very important in DevOps and cloud computing. Now, cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud use virtual machines heavily. When you launch a server in the cloud, you are usually launching a virtual machine, not a physical computer dedicated only to you. So When you launch a server, you are usually renting a virtual machine. So scalability is also the reason why virtual machines are like the bread and butter of DevOps. So to clarify, virtual machines are not the same as containers. So virtual machines have their own operating system. They use more resources, while containers share the same operating system and are lighter. So we'll talk about containers in a future video. So let us summarize everything we have learned in a very simple term. So a virtual machine is a computer inside a computer. A virtual machine is isolated, that is, it is safe and very dependent. It is very easy to create and delete. This is what makes virtual machine flexible. So virtual machine help saves companies money and physical space. So it helps in efficiency. So understanding virtual machine is non-negotiable for DevOps. So if you are getting into cloud, DevOps, or even IT in general, understanding virtual machine is a must. Now you don't need to you don't need to master everything today. You just need to understand the idea. So if this video has helped you, please subscribe, like, and comment. In the next video, we'll talk about how we can create virtual machines in the cloud. See you in the next one.